Okay, I will now let members of the public into this meeting. So just one more moment. And we can call the meeting to order.
Wonderful. Good morning. It looks like we have a quorum. We have our live stream up on YouTube, and our members of the public have been let into the virtual meeting. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. I am Amy Chan. I am the new chairwoman of the Clean Election Commission. And item 1 is to call to order. It is 9:31 a.m., January 28th, 2021. And if I didn't say it correctly before, I hereby call this meeting to order of the Clean Election Commission. So we will now take attendance. I want to welcome everybody. So to take attendance, and forgive me if I'm a little rough, I've had 4 years to observe all these other wonderful chair people take this role, and I'm a little nervous today, to be honest. So forgive me, and I'm sorry, especially because we have all these other attendees who have to bear with me on this day. So call to order and attendance. So we'll now take attendance. Could each commissioner please state your presence for the record? And maybe we can go by seniority, starting with Commissioner, is that Commissioner Kimball who would be senior, or Commissioner Meyer? Now I can't remember.
I think it's me. Commissioner Meyer's here.
Commissioner Kimball is here.
Commissioner Payton is here.
Thank you. And of course, for the record, I'm Commissioner Chan, and I'm here as well. And so with that, we can move on to agenda item 2, discussion and possible action on commission minutes for December 17th, 2020. Is there any discussion on the minutes for the December meeting? Or do I have a motion to entertain?
Madam Chairman, this is Commissioner Kimball.
Yes, Commissioner Kimball.
I move that we approve the minutes for the commission meeting of December 17th, 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
It's Commissioner Payton. I'll second that.
Thank you. All right. I have a motion and a second. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Meyer, how do you vote? Oh, we couldn't hear that.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimball, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Payton, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And we have 4 aye, 0 nay, and the motion has passed. All right, and Tom, if I'm doing anything wrong, will you stop me and correct me, please?
You're not, well, I'll do my best. You're not doing anything wrong.
Thank you. But just, I know you would stop me if I were. Okay. Like I said, I'm a little nervous. All right. Moving on to agenda item 3, discussion and possible action on executive director's report and legislative update, including election and administrative bills such as House Bill 2014 and House Bill 2110. Tom, I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Thank you, Commissioners, for being here. I will try to keep this part of the meeting brief. I know we've got other folks here. We've got other things to do soon, so including you all. I do obviously want to note the legislature's in session, and I'll circle back to that in a second. As you can see, the Avery and Gina and Alec have been working on a variety of new opportunities and efforts to continue to work with community groups, especially that are interested in civic engagement and civic education. And it's which is great, and it's great to have that consistent presence now that over the course of the last 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, we are we wanted to we have one of the enforcement or complaints that we have on this agenda for one aspect of that. We have some other folks, some other issues pending next steps. And then I guess rather than well, the other election case issue I think is probably worth noting is that as you all know, the legislature had subpoenaed records and equipment related to Maricopa County's handling of the county of ballots. The County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously on the 26th to go ahead and start that process. So so that was one matter that was in court that seems like that is moving forward at this point. So, and I think that that'll tie in also when we get lower in the agenda to some of our voter education issues. On the legislative front, we wanted to call out two specific bills because they're familiar bills at this point. House Bill 2014 is a bill which would essentially change how the Clean Elections Commission specifically is treated under the Governor's Regulatory Review Council and expand to some extent the number of issues that the Governor's Regulatory Review Council could get called into by a petition from any person. The sponsor of the bill sees this as a extension of Prop 306. The House Rules Committee, well, it went through House Government and Elections ago, and then this week it went through the Rules Committee. It's worth noting that the Rules Committee attorney agreed with our position with respect to that we've had with respect to whether or not this was an amendment under the Voter Protection Act. They said it did. Nevertheless, as with last year, the majority is unlikely to accept such a clause. The rule attorney also, and I should note, said that he, in his view, based on Prop 306, if this had a 3/4 vote, it would further the purpose of Prop 306, which raises some pretty interesting legal questions about how far the legislature thinks it can go in furthering the purpose of Prop 306 as opposed to, and I don't think it was intended to be opposed to, the commission's overall status as a state commission. And then the other bill is 2110, which was up last year with this. So it's the third year for 2014, second year for 2110. 2110 says it's portrayed by its sponsor as a bill to give folks who can't afford to pay traffic fines a break, which is fine. That's not a policy issue that I personally, that on behalf of the commission, we have a particular position on. What we do have a position on is the fact that this bill notwithstands any other law and then frees up judges to set up whatever need-based decisions they want to make. The Clean Elections Act funding source is a surcharge on those fees and fines. It is not a fee and fine. It has always been treated differently than those kinds of fees and fines because the surcharges, for example, when monetary obligations were part of coming off of absolute discharge for voting purposes, surcharge debt was never included in there. So there's example after example of how surcharge is not the same. Nevertheless, the bill lumps all these things together. It notwithstands any other law, meaning it notwithstands the Clean Elections Act. And so for those reasons, we believe that it does trigger the VPA on up to at least up to all three prongs of the VPA. It supersedes an appropriation. It reappropriates the surcharge to other purposes. It supersedes the surcharge entirely by virtue of the notwithstanding clause. And then obviously, because of those two things, it amends the Clean Elections Act. This one, we also believe doesn't further the purpose because defunding the act does not further the purpose of the act. Nevertheless, this one, the rules attorney does not see any implication of the VPA on this. In the rules attorney's view, because, and I'm going to say this wrong because it's still a little inscrutable to me, but the upshot of the analysis is because the terms in the Clean Elections Act talked about fines and fees collected, somehow, if those aren't collected, it's just not implicated. But that's not what the bill does. The bill notwithstands them. The bill says they don't exist. It doesn't say we're going to preempt the collection. It says we are literally going to ignore the existing law, and that's why I've had a hard time following the rules attorney analysis and how this is not a direct violation of the Voter Protection Act. Nevertheless, those two bills are clear to be voted on by the full House and could be voted on as soon as today, depending upon how many calendars they decide to put out today for committee of the whole and or third reading. Now, it's a lot of background. Just to say, the reality is that the second bill, the first bill is what it is. We've made our points there. I'm not sure how we'll pursue that, making those points in the Senate, other than by letter potentially. I appeared in the House committees on the House bills in the House origin. Not sure that's necessary again. I also don't know if there's anything we might be able to do to change the vote count on an issue like this, it being sort of a tertiary issue to at best everybody else, but a primary issue to us. With respect to the funding issue, again, similar problem in terms of that bill also has bipartisan support. So Republicans and Democrats are willing to look past or agree with the rules attorney that you can essentially preempt the Clean Elections Act funding without violating or even implicating the Voter Protection Act. So that's a harder bill. We're a bipartisan commission. They're bipartisan. They've got bipartisan sponsors. So that is happening there. So the bottom line is here to sort of start to try to frame expectations around this. We will do our best to make the legal cases we always have made. We also, don't want to push that past the point of effectiveness. And then obviously, I think it's within our rights, and I plan to go ahead and at some point, assuming if this were to get moving toward the governor's office, we would ask the governor's office to consider vetoing the bill. We did that last year, although the bills never actually got to his desk because of COVID. So, there are a number of other voter bills in the hopper. Quite a few of them got a lot of attention. Julian's put together a list of tracking all those bills. Obviously, there's a lot of bills having to do with participation and how people participate. We have not heretofore weighed in on any of those bills, but nevertheless, those are there too. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone had, sort of. There will be other decisions down the road to make about these bills potentially, but I don't want to sugarcoat the reality that if we don't have the entire Democratic caucus, we don't have a chance to get one or two Republicans to vote otherwise. So that's that. without a VPA clause, the legislature will treat that as enacted if it's signed by the governor. It's just where we are, and we'll have to jump off those bridges as we come to them if we choose to. But I just want to make sure that you had a direct and as frank as I can be assessment of where we are on those bills. So really, that's all I had to say about those things. I'm happy to answer any questions, and obviously the rest of the staff's here if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions? Oh, I see Commissioner Meyer has his hand raised. Go ahead, Commissioner Meyer.
Tom, thank you for that background. So just so I'm understanding you, as things currently sit on these two bills, the position is being taken that it doesn't require the 75% supermajority to pass them?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Meyer, that is the view of the legislative majority. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kimball?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, you alluded to this, but I made note of at least 8 bills that would have the effect, whether it's intended or not, I'm not going to speculate, of making it more difficult to vote or of suppressing turnout, which would seem to be a major concern to us, seeing as how voter education is a central part of our mission. And I think a main part of voter education is getting people to vote. But there are bills like the notarized signatures on early ballots. There's a number of bills relating to the PEVL, either doing away with it or knocking people off it if they don't vote in one election. There's things on the cure time for unsigned ballots, unsigned early ballots. The bill that purports to address the Sharpie Gate, whatever that was. The county recorder may conduct voter registration drives only in a government building. That seems to really make it more difficult for people to register. And it seems like bills that make it more difficult to vote, more difficult to register, more difficult to vote early, if that is your choice, as it is for more than 80% of Arizonans, are something that we need to be heard on.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kimball, I think that, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a couple of different ways to approach that. One, obviously, you all, and to the extent you want it, although I think most of you have it probably, you know, you're always obviously free to weigh in on these bills yourselves. One of the reasons why we as staff have not taken the initiative on those issues, and one of the reasons that we obviously are open to direction is because and let me caveat this by saying, look, the tensions that have been put on the electoral system are very difficult to negotiate if you truly want to take a quote unquote nonpartisan approach. There are only 2 parties in the legislature, and they are diametrically opposed on most of these issues. If the staff were to go down and say, look, you know, as opposed to another person, I mean, the Secretary of State's office has, I don't know if they've actually testified, but they certainly have been on the internets talking about these things. It just creates a tension where it inherently does. So let me put it this way: if one party moves the way an issue is treated within their coalition farther in one direction or the other, it puts a strain on someone, on an entity that's trying to be, by virtue of its mandate, bipartisan, right? I mean, that's just, so the further this way or that way you go, the more that weighs on us. And there is so why that big long preface? Because one of the ways we've tried to carve out the way the voter education functions within the act is to focus on the law as it is. We go to and participate with folks who have lots of issues with the way the laws are, maybe and how they will be, but our focus has been on trying to get people over the hump to have that information. Ironically, obviously, the funding bill damages our ability to do that potentially more than any of these other things, as far as our role. So the cost benefit analysis is we get, blowback from the legislature, but on the other hand, we get that inherently. Two, we haven't been invited by, let me put it this way, and this again goes to Clean Elections' unique status as a state agency, and I say unique winkingly. We have not been invited by anyone to participate in this discussion. And the absence of an invitation for a bureaucrat like myself without direction from you all is all I in bureaucratese need to know.
Well, Madam
But that,
Chair,
now, if you want me to do something else, that's a different.
well, let me just push back against one thing you said, Tom. You send us this grid of bills, and I went down the center column, which explains what the bill would do. I didn't go down one of the other columns that said who introduced it, and I understand that maybe one party is responsible for a majority of the issues I have, but I think it's our role as a bipartisan, nonpartisan organization, and me as an independent, to stand up for the voters. And I think that there are a number of bills here that strike out at the voters and the voters' ability to vote as they wish, to make it easier to register people so they are allowed to vote. We should, it's my personal opinion, we ought to be opposed to things that make it more difficult for people to vote. And if that comes across as being against one party or another, that's not my intent. My intent is to be a voter advocate. And if people see that as another way, I think that's their concern, because these aren't bills that we introduce. These are bills that other people introduce that we are being forced to react
to. Commissioner Kimball, thank you. And I think I see Commissioner Meyer. Is your hand raised again, Commissioner Meyer?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, it is. I think what Commissioner Kimball is saying, and I agree with that, is shouldn't making it easier to vote be a nonpartisan issue in and of itself? That's kind of how I see it, and how we, what we do regarding these bills, of course, is, I'm going to take a lead from Tom and the other commissioners and before I make any decision, but I think making it easier to vote in and of itself should be a nonpartisan issue.
Thanks, Commissioner Meyer. If I may make a comment, and Commissioner Payton, I don't know if you want to jump in here. I don't want to, prevent you from speaking, but I really agree with what Commissioner Kimball has stated, and Commissioner Meyer as well. I have, a lot of philosophical issues with making it more difficult and raising barriers to registration and voting. But I also hear what Tom is saying. And one thing that weighs heavily on my mind is what he mentioned about the bill that, if that passes, it's going to make it more difficult for us to even do our voter education mandate. So what I'm hearing, I think, is that if we're spending our political capital, so to speak, on weighing in on bills that we, firmly believe are important to weigh in against because they make it harder for people to vote and register to vote, which I think I support us being against those bills because I do believe, I agree with you both, Commissioners Meyer and Kimball. But I also think maybe sometimes we have to think about the big picture and whether we have to think about that foundational bill of the bill that's about funding and whether that makes it impossible to do our mission in the first place of voter education. And I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the big picture here, and I don't know if Tom wants to step in and correct me. One of the questions I had about that, what I'm thinking of as a foundational bill of our funding mechanism, is whether we have any alternate options or plans about that bill to propose. Is there anything we can do about that going forward before even thinking about addressing the issues? And I agree. I mean, it shouldn't be political, and yet here we are. It is, and it has been for years. I mean, look at the voter ID, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, having said all that, can I ask Tom and kind of go back to that question about the funding bill, if I can call it that? Do we have any proposal to make to change it up a little bit that would make it something more palatable for us and make it something that would work for our agency? Tom, or I don't know, Mike, maybe.
Yes. I mean, I think that with respect to the funding bill, I think that the key is that we don't know the immediate impact. I mean, in other words, we don't know how many people this will affect. We don't know what the metrics are going to be. I can certainly tell you that at one of the hearings that I appeared at, the bill sponsor said that he understood from the courts that they believe this would be have a minimal financial effect. I have tried to get that confirmed. I have not been able to successfully do that yet. So we don't know the impact. We know is that the principle of notwithstanding the entire funding mechanism is a tiger you don't want to unleash, if that makes sense. Because once you do that, anything you can find to notwithstand in any other voter pass bill, it's really a BPA issue more than it is a clean elections issue, really, when you think of legally, right? Because if you can notwithstand that, you can notwithstand, like you could say, notwithstanding 36 whatever, cigarettes are no longer considered tobacco products. And, those kinds of, what I mean? There's a lot of mischief to be made with notwithstanding clauses in the VPA. I mean, that's what that legal issue is. As far as pushing back, I mean, obviously, if this bill were to pass, we will be asked, as we have been, we'll be asked to get, I'm sure we'll be asked to get involved in some kind of litigation. I'm not sure, but I
prefer it not to get to litigation. I'm
No.
just wondering if I'd prefer to have some way of carving us out, or if that's possible. I don't know if it's possible.
Well, in prior reform, this is criminal justice reform, I guess they call this. They in fact have made a specific exception for the Clean Elections Act. The courts have recognized that in their own guidance on certain issues as well. Where the courts are in terms of how they're administering surcharges and stuff is, again, I'm still at a point where I don't quite have the information I need to assess that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that yes, we would like to pursue that. I would say that based on just being down at the legislature about these issues and looking at the lay of the land, how they played out in committee, the Democratic caucus members who are aligned with the bill sponsor, Mr. Biasucci, don't want to hear about it. I mean, we had two members, and this happened in the meeting. I don't know if this is just how it, I don't mean to just tell a war story, but last year, this bill, 2110, what's now 2110, we had although there were Democratic sponsors then, we had relatively full support in committee. It went to the House Judiciary Committee. The House Judiciary members at that time did an excellent, that agreed with us, did an excellent job of laying out the constitutional case for the exception. this year was assigned to transportation. There are members of the transportation committee who are very aligned with Mr. Biasucci. They, throughout the hearing, on the hearings on multiple bills of his, he got compliments from folks who we would hope would vote on our side on these kinds of things. And then when it came time for the vote, half the Democrats on that committee left, which means they didn't want to be on the record voting against this bill. That's a very significant difference from last year. Last year, this was, not to say that the funding source is entirely partisan. I understand that blah, blah, blah. There are Democrats who hate the funding source, Republicans who don't care. But the point is that, the fact is that Mr. Biasucci has more, he's the House whip. He has more power than we have. We don't have political capital. we could generate now, and here's the alternative. If we chose to go in this direction, and this might, I'm not sure how to resolve this without another discussion, but were we to change direction on that, could we generate some political capital? Maybe. Because obviously by not speaking out, we are not adding, we're not adding anything to the discussion, and we're not using, none of the commission's not using its, if you will, legal and arguably moral authority to
Well, and that takes me back, I guess,
to deal with those things. So,
what Commissioner Kimball and Commissioner Meyer were then talking about. Do the other commissioners, do we want to then spend some of our political capital on what we believe is our core mission, which is voter education and advocating for voters? I mean, I really believe that is part of our mission, a very important part, and the voters really need us right now. I think they're kind of, there's a battle right now, I think, going on.
If I may, this is Commissioner Payton.
Sure, Commissioner Payton, please.
So could I jump in there? I guess I'm back to where I was before a couple years ago. I think this financial thing is something that could seriously damage us. And I think we need to head that off at the pass as best we can. And if we go on these other, I'm going to call it tangents, I understand everybody's feeling on that, but we need every vote we can get. And if we give them more ammunition to not support us because the other people are all this behind the scenes stuff, I think that we need to use whatever political capital we have to keep this financial thing at bay. And if we do anything else, a lot of this stuff is going to die in committee and whatever, and maybe we say something later on down the road. But I don't want to poison the well, and I don't want to be the stick in the mud, but I'm afraid that if we are seen as to being, people are going to view this as really partisan, and whether we're not, or I know I'm not, obviously, but I think if we have something to say about that, I think maybe we should say that down the road once something erupts into a real possible situation, I guess, if you understand what I'm saying.
Thanks, Commissioner Payton. I think, and Commissioner Kimball, if I can just say one thing and then I'll get to you. I do agree with Commissioner Payton on one thing. I value what Commissioner Payton has said. I agree with him that the funding thing could be a huge issue for us. And I don't necessarily trust the courts saying they think it's not going to be an issue. And And I think maybe we can wait and see what shakes out, because I agree with Commissioner Payton that some of these bills may not go anywhere. Commissioner Kimball, please go ahead.
Well, you made some points I was going to.
Oh,
I'm not advocating that we immediately go down, storm the Capitol, and make a big scene of these bills. I would take exception to Commissioner Payton saying that these are tangents. I don't think these are tangents. I think these are our core mission. I think we need to keep an eye on these bills and be prepared to react. But I don't think that that we can just stand by and not say anything if it looks like there's an attempt, for instance, to do away with the PEVL, or to throw people off the PEVL if they don't vote in one election, or to make it more difficult to register. And if this is the way that it looks like they're heading, I think we need to come back at some future meeting, and if we need a special one, so be it. But I don't think we can allow these things to become law, and whether that's something that we should weigh in on, or they just die on their own, that would be great. But I think these are key parts of why the voters created the commission, is to be their advocate. I don't want to belabor this, because I know we have people here on other things, but I just wanted to make that point.
thank you. This has been a wonderful discussion. And if there's nothing more, I think we can revisit this at our next meeting. I think there's time for that still in the legislative session. So unless there's anything else on this agenda item, I will move us along to our voter education plan. I'm just looking at the time here. Gina, I believe that is you. Am I right about that? Yes, of course I am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Today I have a presentation for you to discuss, a brief recap of the general election. We did a brief recap in November, more on the current issues related to the general election, and today I have a brief recap for you in regards to our voter education campaign. And then I have the 2021 voter education plan for your review and approval. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And I am going to assume you all can see my screen unless I hear otherwise. So just as a reminder, as we've gone through this already, we did see an exceptionally high turnout in the 2020 general election, which was phenomenal to see that level of participation from voters. The messaging that we included in our voter education campaign was, of course, how to vote in the election, all of the logistics ranging from voter registration, how to get your ballot, what's on your ballot, the candidates that are running, information about our debates, the voter guide. So the typical messaging that we do surrounding every election, so the voters have all of the information they need to participate. We did carve out specifically more messaging regarding the early voting process and the situation that was occurring at the United States Postal Service. We did focus additionally on the security of the ballot by mail process, the safety and the precautions taken during COVID-19 so voters could vote in person. And we also saw the need to provide more voter education about the actual administration of elections, the process that it entailed, what happens to your ballot, how do you know, how can you confirm as a voter if your ballot was counted. So those are the overarching messaging themes that occurred during the general election. And the paid media tactics that we utilized to connect and reach with voters, we had ads that were on television and YouTube. We enlisted radio reads. We had print ads. And of course, we were in the digital world with videos and banners and social media and search. So if you go to Google and you type in voter registration, an ad would pop up leading you to the Clean Elections voter registration page, and we had billboards. So the media that we used here, the ads that we ran, were all highly focused on, again, the logistics of voting. We partnered with Reister. They've been a partner that we've been proud to partner with for the past several years, and so we work with them closely to ensure that the dollars that we put behind reaching these voters, that we get our max reach through there. And so we found across the board that the metrics for our success were performing well above industry standards. So we were very happy with our reach and our tactics here on the paid media side. This is just some examples of the ads that we ran. You can see they're very straightforward. When the general election debate or general election day is, voter education guide, voting early, you can see the signed, sealed, counted, relaying key dates and messages, the schedule for the debates, letting folks know that they can vote from home, and of course, voter registration. So again, all of our messaging was very straightforward for the voter in terms of the logistics of voting. In addition, being at a statewide election year, the commission, of course, we had our debates. So we did have our legislative debates this year, as we did in the primary. Of course, we have them in the general election as well. Out of 30 legislative districts, we had 24 debates that we hosted. And as you'll recall, of course, due to COVID, we had to pivot earlier in this year and transform our debate model into a virtual model. And we saw great success with that. Of the debates that we held for the general election specifically, we had over 9,000 views of those videos. Now, when you compare that to previous years, it's tripled. So we were really happy to see the level of engagement with voters in this new format. It appeared to be more convenient and accessible for voters to tune in either during the live segment or on demand. Voters were able to submit questions in real time through phone, text, and email, or they could submit questions in advance of the debate. And we did partner with the Arizona Capitol Times to provide moderator services. And we felt that was a success as well, because it's really important during our debates that we have a strong moderator who knows how to really get those questions and answers flowing. In addition to our partnership with Arizona Capitol Times, I may have mentioned this during the primary election, but I wanted to refresh your memory. We also partnered with Cap Times for their Meet the Candidates event. And we found this was also very successful, and it allowed the commission to keep these videos up on our website as content throughout the general election cycle. So voters could continue to learn as much as possible the candidates that were choosing to represent them. And this quote here, this is just some feedback from the Capitol Times directly, and they found that it was one of their most successful and amazing events. And again, it lends to that virtual component where we're finding voters really are more in tune with that option. Again, they can watch it from their phone, they can watch it from the comfort of their couch and the TV. So it's more convenient for the voter to engage in the political process in this virtual format. We also had our statewide debates, and this year, the only statewide race on the ballot was the corporation commissioner. And we do partner with Arizona PBS to broadcast our debates. We've had that partnership for several years. And with our corporation commissioner debate, again, we found solid success in the viewerships and the households. The debate was ran on September 30th, and AZPBS, they ran it both at 5 p.m. and at 10 p.m. in their broadcasts. And the household, so in addition to the household viewings, which actually, as we see, higher views at the 10 p.m. showing as opposed to the 5 p.m. And I imagine that has to do with work, evening time, things like that. The debate is also hosted on AZPBS on Arizona Horizon, their website as well. So we were able to reach roughly around 10,000 views with the corporation commissioner debate. In addition to the legislative and corporation commissioner debate, we also sponsored the U.S. Senate debate this year, and this was an outstanding success. We were able to partner with several prominent news sources, media sources, Arizona PBS, Arizona Public Media, KJAZ, and Arizona Republic for this debate. And this is the feedback, the information that I have here is directly from Arizona Horizon. And the U.S. Senate debate received the third highest ratings of any PBS show on any PBS station in the country in the past 2 years. And that's phenomenal, the level of interest from voters to want to engage with that debate. This is just an example of some of the creative that we ran to let voters know, hey, this debate is occurring and how you can tune in. Here's a still of the actual set with Ted Simons as he served as one of the moderators. So it was quite a successful sponsorship for the US Senate debate. In addition to the debates, we of course had our voter education guide. This guide contains the profiles for all of the candidates that are running for statewide and legislative office. For the general election specifically, we sent out about 2.2 million voter guides. And we make every effort to provide the voter guide in an accessible format. So we automatically send it out in both English and Spanish, but we also have different versions available for voters, such as large print. This is an example of our Navajo version of the cover. We also provide it in plain text on our website, so it's accessible for screen readers. And we partner with Sun Sounds of Arizona to provide an audio version of the guide. And we've had that partnership for several years, and we value it immensely because not only do voters engage with the audio version through Sun Sound's toll-free number, but they also submit questions too. And so it's available. We partner with Sun Sounds and we work with them to be able to connect with the voters through their services and respond to their voter education questions. For the first time ever this year, we also produced the voter education guide, in American Sign Language. This was a partnership that we did for both the primary and general election voter guides, and we worked with the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing. And this was a very immense undertaking, just considering the amount of content that needed to be translated into sign language, the physical task of doing the signing and the interpreters. And so it was quite a production. We were very proud of it. We received positive feedback from the candidates and from members of the legislature who were running about having this accessible version available for voters. We partnered with, again, through the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We were able to bring on Linda Bove. She's the acclaimed Sesame Street actress, deaf actress. And so she really led the team here in making sure that all of the signers and the interpreters were consistent in the translation of these political terms, election terms. And we were happy to host this content on our website for voters. So again, it's opening up voter education and making it as accessible as possible to all voters across the state. And just the amount of voters in our state, I believe it's over 1 million voters who are deaf or hard of hearing. It was quite the necessity. So we're very happy with this project. This screen here is meant to reflect our outreach efforts for the year. In working with Alec and Avery and trying to figure out how do I capture the amount of outreach that the staff has undertaken. It was difficult to figure out how to present that to you. And so I decided on a word cloud because I felt it really, this isn't even a fraction of the amount of outreach that Avery's conducted through the year. And of course, during a pandemic as well. So most of this was, all of it was virtual, and being able to still keep that level of commitment and outreach to it. I think it's a testament to Avery's skills and abilities in fostering those partnerships and relationships with these community-based organizations. But when you just look at the word cloud, you can see it's a well range of communities that we're reaching out to. We see colleges here, students, cities, Tempe, Mesa, the words civics, engagement, education, health, voting, informing, there's veterans, there's just a whole level here that we're reaching across the state. And so I think this is, again, a great representation of the efforts that have been undertaken by Alec and Avery. And briefly, I'll go over our website. So everything that we do, we guide voters to our website. Our website is really the crux of the information that we provide to voters. It has everything the voter needs, ranging from how to get their ballot, how to register to vote, to seeing the candidates in their district or learning about their upcoming debate. And so during the time period of the general election, I was great to see that the number of page views that we had was about 1.7 million page views, which is phenomenal because all of the content that we're providing voters are consuming. And this is just a screenshot of some of the pages, the top pages that voters were interested in. And you can see a lot of that had to do with early voting and election security. So if there's no questions in regards to the efforts that we did in the 2020 general election, I'm happy to jump into our plans for this year. Even though it is not a statewide election year, there are elections every year. So we have our local elections that will be occurring March, May, August, and November. These local elections, we've continuously tried to promote the message that local elections are just important, if not more, because the decisions made at the local level can impact voters, their daily lives. So we'll be working with the counties and our local jurisdictions to cull all of that election information and host that on our website. We'll of course be running our outreach and our media and our creative to connect with voters to inform them of these elections and how they can participate. And of course, we do have the start of the qualifying period towards the end of this year. So those are some key dates for us. As you can see, the March election is already well underway. Our UOCAVA ballots have already gone out, and the voter registration deadline is up and coming. So we are definitely engaging in letting voters know how they can participate in these local elections this year. And as we do typically in odd years, the commission invests in research. So that is our goal for this year as well. We'd like to jump into research with voters, both from a qualitative and quantitative aspect. And the goal here is to really take a pulse of where voters are right now, coming off of this general election, well, the whole election year, all of 2020, but specifically the general election. We would like to learn more about what voters are feeling, how they view elections, what their perceptions are about voting and the political process. And our goal here is to make decisions based off of our learnings directly from voters. We want their feedback, and that feedback will guide the creative and our outreach efforts for the remainder of the year. So the timeline for that is through February and April. Some of the themes and the messages that we know that or we expect that we'll be covering for this year. Again, this will be driven by the research, but of course, participation in the political process. That's in our preamble. It's the heart of the Clean Elections Act, and so that includes voting, but also civics and candidate information, running for office, or supporting those who do. But some of the themes that really stood out to us that are going to be important are rebuilding that trust and confidence in the electoral system. We know that there are a lot of voters right now who perhaps have lost trust in the system. And so we need to look at how can we educate people further on the realities of the electoral system, on how your ballot is processed, the safeguards and the securities that are in place, and really trying to focus on, there is a difference between policy and politics and election administration. Yes, they do overlap, but for, when we're talking about how that ballot is handled, it's handled by your neighbors, it's handled by poll workers, it's handled by public servants, government staff, government employees, not necessarily by politicians. And so we want to dive back deep into the weeds of election administration. And we've saw that voters have the interest in that from what we've seen in our search histories and the progress of our websites, the pages that were hit. We can see that voters want to know more about this. And so we want to continue to provide that service to them, all while kind of thinking about the overarching theme of what is our responsibility to you? What is the responsibility of the Clean Elections Commissions to voters as it entails or pertains to voter education? So again, these are just some thoughts and themes of messagings that we'll be exploring. But again, we will really rely heavily on our research to shape our plans. Of course, we'll have a youth voter outreach campaign. As you know, we still have our wings, and we'll continue to utilize that and that imagery to connect with voters. We will be focusing primarily on our Instagram account as our primary youth channel. And of course, we'll be targeting key events throughout the year, such as graduation, to connect with voters. We do have a civics curriculum that commission staff has worked on and developed with our partners. And this curriculum was built in an effort to provide teachers tools and assets that they could use in the classroom that would still count towards the curriculum standards. But while they can continue to teach students about civics and voting and the importance of voting informed. And so we have this in a format where it could be launched either in person or virtual, depending on whether or not schools are in person. And so we'll be looking at rolling that out towards the end of this year. And of course, we plan on creating additional assets for teachers and students, such as expanding our toolkits for students who perhaps want to have a voter registration drive. We will continue to foster our partnerships that we've developed, and we hope to meet with all of our 15 county recorders and election officials. We recently met with the Maricopa County Recorder, and our goal is to have direct communications with our local election partners to make sure that we understand what their needs are in terms of voter education, the themes that they're seeing with their voters in their community. We'd like to continue our partnerships with the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and continue to provide voter education in an accessible format for that community. We'll be creating a request a speaker module for our website to make it more convenient for the community to request a member of the commissioner or commission staff to speak at community events and provide information, whether it's running for office or how to get registered to vote, looking forward to 2022, how to prepare. And we'll also be creating a video series for voter education information, such as, the processing of your ballot, how is it tabulated, how to register to vote, understanding how to follow the money in elections, things like that. So we plan to create these video series so they'll serve as resources, whether it's, a community-based organization having a local chapter meeting, and they can have these resources at their fingertips to share with their members during those events. And of course, we'll continue to work with our media partners and ensure that we're continuing to get word out to the community about upcoming elections. And we will continue to work on our website and our technology that the Commission has. These are very important tools and resources for voters that we provide. As I mentioned, our website is the crux of all of what we do. And so we recently completed an audit of the website. As you'll recall, a few years ago, we did a redesign. And so this is the first presidential election since that redesign, and just looking at how much the website has grown and levels of content that we provide to voters, we want to make sure that it's user-friendly still, and that it's meeting the needs of voters and of the information that we intend to put out there. The website, I like to look at it in two different ways. It's a resource for voters when it comes to the logistics of voting, but it's also perhaps subject matter expert content, if you will. It explains what a presidential preference election is. It explains the security of tabulation machines. It explains, how your ballot is processed. And so there's a lot of great information out there that we see the community is engaging with. When we pull our reports and we look at referrals and we look at backlinks, it's amazing to see our website. I like to point out, because I'm a personal fan of this, but I love the fact that Rolling Stone links to our website. We've seen Cosmopolitan link to it. We've seen 538 link to it. We see sites from a national level that are driving users to the Clean Elections website. And of course, the level of engagement in state as well. If they're on news sites, they're on political websites. We see a lot of folks that are linking to Clean Elections and looking to our website as the source for official election information. So we'll continue to work on improving our applications that we host on the website, such as the dashboard and the compass, and of course our app, and all the while making sure that the content we provide in a technical format is accessible. And in addition to voting and the elections, again, that overarching theme of participation in the political process, that expands further than just voting. So we're looking at making sure voters know how to connect with their current elected officials who's representing them in office, understanding that the legislature is in session right now. We'll provide information on redistricting, which will occur this year. The new lines will be drawn and how that intersects with voting, and updating and refreshing the content on our website for running for office. So looking forward to next year, we'll have a statewide election. All of the statewide offices will be on the ballot. Of course, we'll have our local elections as well too. So we'll do as much preparation as we can in 2021 for all of our efforts, looking forward to the statewide election cycle next year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Gina. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners or comments? Okay. Gina, thank you so much. Oh,
This is
I'm
Galen
sorry.
Payton.
Commissioner Payton, go ahead.
Gina, that was just so impressive, and I'm proud that I'm a part of it, and the staff has just done an outstanding job, and I can't say enough. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Commissioner Payton. Commissioner Kimball?
I agree with everything Commissioner Payton said. Our website is outstanding. A lot of excellent information there that you can find in one place. And I'm a big fan of everything, Gina, you've done in voter education. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners Payton and Kimball. Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't call out Alec specifically. He is our webmaster, and so the website is his baby. So thank you so much for acknowledging that the efforts on our website.
Commissioner Meyer?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Commissioners Payton and Kimball said. And also thank you so much to Avery for all the outreach he is doing. That's wonderful and very much appreciated. And I also just want to comment on the civics curriculum for the high school, middle school, and elementary kids. That's really exciting. I would like to learn a little bit more about that, Gina. So maybe we can talk offline about that. But that's great. So thank you so much for all your work.
Gina, it looks like we have a question from Rivko Knox on one of the last two slides, the terms SEO and SEM. Could you explain what those terms mean?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Rivko, hello. Yes, that's terms in regards to search engine optimization and search engine marketing. So think about Google, if you will. So if you go to Google and you type in voter registration, so one of two things will occur. If the commission is employing a paid ad, then you would see ad at the top of your Google search, and it would have a link to the commission's voter registration pages. Or, if it's not an ad, then it's the optimization that we've built within our website, making sure that behind the scenes, the technical components of our website, we've primed it so that we are optimized in the tier that we appear on Google search. So we do see that search is one of our strongest areas. We've seen millions of impressions of voters when it comes to search and looking to research voting terms, election terms, if you will. And so that's driving a lot of users to our website. So that's, we look at how can we improve our website, but behind the scenes, can we tag certain pages certain ways so that they appear better when Google is indexing our website.
Thank you, Gina. And I see Rivko wrote, thank you from someone from the 20th century. And if I could just echo what Commissioner Payton said so well, Gina, you've built such a wonderful team with Avery and Alec, and the three of you together are just indomitable. So thank you so much. And I don't know if any other members of the public have any comments or questions they have for you. And I don't see anything. And if there isn't any further discussion, I would ask for a motion to adopt the voter education plan as presented by Ms. Roberts.
Commissioner Meyer, I move we adopt the voter education plan presented by Ms. Roberts.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kimball, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kimball. All right, it's been moved and seconded. With that, I will call the roll. Commissioner Meyer?
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Kimball?
Aye.
Commissioner Payton?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. That is 4 ayes and 0 nays. And so we have adopted the voter education plan as presented by Gina Roberts. Thank you so much. Before we move on to item 5, I just wanted to check in with the court reporter if she needs a break. It's been about an hour. And I just wanted to do that before we jump into the next item on the agenda of
if I may, that's to dovetail on that question, to the court reporter, we do have after the next item the next item after that is we'll have more interaction potentially among the commissioners and the audience, and because it's an
Okay.
enforcement related thing. So
Okay.
I guess
and-
what I'm trying to say is that's an important, we should find that out.
Okay. So court
Because it's going to
reporter-
be, because we may have worse, let me put it this way,
So item 5 will probably be a little shorter. Item 6 could be longer, is what you're saying, Tom?
yeah, although item 6, if we wanted to, I mean, or if you, I mean, whatever works for you and for the court reporter, and then obviously Mr. Ariano is here, so I just want to make sure that we also get him out of here. So whatever works among the three of among the court reporter and Mr. Ariano, I guess is really what I'm
Okay,
trying
and
to
court
find out.
reporter is fine for now.
Okay.
So, and Mr. Ariano is here for the item 6.
Yeah, I think
So you want to do item 6 first?
that would probably make some sense actually. If nobody cares, if nobody has any opinions otherwise.
All right.
Aye.
Why don't we then go out of order? We'll do item 6 first, discussion and possible action on MUR 20-03, Arizona Education Association. And I believe, Tom, are you going to present that, or is this Mike's? I apologize.
No, I screwed up the order here. I apologize, Madam Chair.
Okay, okay, that is Tom. So
Yeah.
I will ask Tom to go ahead and give an overview of the recommendation.
And do we know? I just want to make sure. I'm sorry, Kathy. Do we know if Mr. Ariano is on the line?
I thought I saw him, but did he?
I can't.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
Okay.
there he is.
Perfect.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you just, your picture now, your name. That's where you went. There you go.
I mean, is it okay with you, Daniel, if we do your thing now?
I would prefer it. Actually, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, the premise of this MUR is that there was, to our knowledge, 2 mailings and some internet advertisements featuring some folks who happened to have been running for the legislature in 2020. We got the complaint in September, although with the mail and everything, it was dated September. We got it a little later than that. And we got our response from the Education Association timely. I've laid out in the memo about as much as I think I have to say on the matter. This is to frame this in the context of the law. Just first, this is an issue that we've dealt with on a regular basis. 2, it has to do with how you apply 16-90101, which is the statute that defines express advocacy for the purposes of Title 16, Chapter 6, and was part of the Clean Elections Act. And there are a couple of key cases. I think some of you are probably familiar with them by now. There's the Wisconsin Right to Life case from the U.S. Supreme Court, and then in Arizona we have a Court of Appeals published case. I believe unless it got depublished sometime, called the Committee for Justice and Fairness versus Arizona Secretary of State. Those cases turn on what is the functional equivalent of express advocacy. Express advocacy is a term of art that says, is the communication designed to urge you to vote for or against a candidate? In this particular case, I've outlined based on what the statute and cases, at least how I read them, what I think about that. And unless you have questions for me on that at this point, obviously I would defer to unless you have questions for me, that's my presentation, and I'd like to obviously give the commissioner a chance to talk with, and for Mr. Ariano to talk with the commissioners. So, but long story short, at least for the purposes of whether there may be reason to believe. I believe that we've met that standard at this point, but obviously I'm open to any questions, and I hope that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Tom. And I apologize. I had to step out for a moment to remind my kids to go to class. We're doing virtual school. I apologize about that. First of all, I know probably Mr. Ariano wants to speak, but I wondered if the commissioners had any questions first about what Tom had said before we, okay. And with that, Mr. Ariano.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm Daniel Ariano of the law firm of Ballard Spahr, and I'm here this morning on behalf of the Arizona Education Association. We submitted a written response to this complaint to the commission, and I would also direct the commission's attention to that response as well, in addition to any questions you may have for me this morning. There's really relatively little, I think, factual dispute as to the communications at issue. We don't dispute that there were 2 mailers and a series of social media advertisements that urged constituents of particular legislators to in turn urge those legislators to call for a special session. And these all went out in August of 2020. And they were, I think, importantly made in the context of a broader discussion going on over the course of that summer over the prospect of a special session for the legislature. The context here, I think, is important because the legislature had abruptly adjourned in March of 2020 due to the COVID-19 crisis. They formally adjourned sine die later in May. And almost as soon as the legislature adjourned, there began to be fairly public calls for the legislature to go into special session to address any number of things. But as most pertinent here, there was also an ongoing discussion for the legislature to address and to buttress school funding. And Arizona Education Association, which is a nonprofit public advocacy organization, had begun its advocacy for a special session as early as that June. On June 24th, the AEA published a report called The Future of Arizona Schools, where it very specifically advocated for a new session to address school funding and school safety, including, for example, additional personal protective equipment for school staff and students. And the AEA then made a separate call again on August 12th, and we cite this in the letter. They had set up a portal whereby people could go on and join their names to letters to advocate their legislators to call the special session. So the advertisements at issue in this complaint were part of that series. And so that's kind of the background kind of factual context here. Legally, I think it's important to keep in mind the standard that's applied here. And under the statute, it's whether the communication, quote, in context can have no reasonable meaning other than to advocate the election or defeat of the candidate. And so the inquiry is not whether candidate advocacy is one reasonable meaning of the communications, nor is it even whether candidate advocacy is the most reasonable meaning of the communications. Rather, we look to whether there is some reasonable meaning other than candidate advocacy, and we certainly have that here. I think Mr. Collins correctly noted, I think there are generally 3 kind of legal cases, precedents, regulations, I think, at issue that kind of guide the inquiry. The first is the Committee for Justice and Fairness case, which is an Arizona Court of Appeals case that dealt with advertisements that went out immediately before the election and called on people to then call what was then a candidate for statewide office to tell them to protect children, a very kind of vague, not specific to any particular legislative or policy issue question. And here, I think these communications are distinguishable from those in Committee for Justice and Fairness in 2 critical respects. The first is the timing. again, the communications in that case went out immediately before the election. And here we were more than 2 months out. Again, these were in August of 2020. By then, the primary had already finished, and the general election was more than 2 months away. The other is that the issue here is a much more concrete policy issue that was actually actionable at the time it was being discussed. The communication at issue in the Court of Appeals case was simply to tell then Superintendent Tom Horn to protect children, not people who harm them. That obviously is a very vague general sentiment and probably an aspersion at that. Whereas here there was the question was to call a special session. Granted, it wasn't a particular bill, it wasn't a particular piece of legislation per se, because the legislature had formally adjourned by that point. But it was something within the power of legislators to do. If enough legislators or the governor determine that there is that there is a need for a special session, they have the power to call that special session at any time of year, regardless of whether the legislature is formally in session or not. And so it was part of a timely conversation, I think, in that respect. The other kind of factor I'd issue too, and this is discussed in the letters as well as Mr. Collins's recommendation, is some of the IRS guidance at issue as to what constitutes express advocacy for nonprofit organizations. And that looks to whether it identifies a legislative issue and also whether it was part of a pattern or part of a series of issue advocacy. In other words, kind of looking to, is this really merely a pretext for, candidate advocacy that's kind of made under the guise of issue advocacy, or is it part of, a good faith kind of pattern of this kind of these kinds of exhortations? And here again, we have that pattern. We have publicly reported among the Capital Times, among the Republic, that immediately after the legislature ended, there were discussions of a special session. And then with respect to AEA specifically, we have at least 2 recorded public communications preceding the advertisements at issue here. We have one on June 24th and another one on August 12th. Finally, I think that the third piece of kind of legal doctrine to look to here is the Wisconsin Right to Life case, the standard from which is drawn almost verbatim in our statute, that no reasonable meaning other than standard. And the court in that case found the ads at issue in that case to be issue advocacy because they were consistent with that of a genuine issue ad. They focused on a legislative issue. We do so here as well. Again, the legislature going into special session is, broadly speaking, a legislative issue. They take a position on that issue. We did that here. We asked voters to urge our legislators to call for a special session. We exhorted the public to adopt that position. And the other factor at issue in that case is they urged the public to contact public officials with respect to the matter. The ads do that here too. They listed the official phone numbers for these legislators so that voters could contact them and advocate for this particular issue. And importantly here, the ads don't mention an election, the legislator's candidacy, the legislator's political party, or any other indicia of electoral politics, other than the fact that these are legislators who, by definition, every 2 years are up for election. So we don't have the typical indicia of candidate advocacy one would expect to find. And I'd venture to say that if this was meant to be candidate advocacy, it was a very poor way of doing it. Again, this was months before the election, and without any indication of when the election would happen, what party it was, who to vote for instead of this candidate. Those factors simply aren't present. And so because of that, looking at the totality of the circumstances and the context in which these ads were made, we would contend that there is a reasonable explanation or a reasonable meaning other than candidate advocacy, and that was a genuine issue ad. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Mr. Ariano? Okay. Mr. Ariano, thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation, and these First Amendment issues are always painful because it is something that I take very seriously. I mean, you want to be able to speak freely in elections and advocate for or against candidates or make this speech and without running afoul of election requirements and you know, the thing that you mentioned that's kind of tripping me up a little bit is, you know, months before an election, and yet it's in that sweet spot right between the primary and general, and you know, your clients, when you say it's months before the election, your clients are kind of benefiting from the fact that our primary was moved back this year. And so I just bring that up because I think, I don't think you're being disingenuous, but I bring that up because I think that's the only reason that, you know, you're outside of that kind of window, which I think is something that I'm kind of considering as far as what I'm thinking about. And the other thing I want to, I guess, bring up, and I don't know if you have a comment on it, is, you know, I'm looking at, I think they're all the same, the flyers. I'm just looking at the one about Representative Jeff Wenninger, I think is how you pronounce his name. And, you know, it does say contact him, ask him to call for a special session. Arizona can't afford to keep failing our students and educators. Arizona deserves safe classrooms, and, among other things. And so, you know, it does have that one specific piece to ask him to call a special session, but without that piece, you know, it's almost like without that one specific piece, you know, how do you, I guess, is it just that one piece that makes it, puts it outside of that, I guess is what I'm asking. Is that what you're saying? Aside, nothing in the flyer kind of puts it outside of the cases that we're talking about, or the law?
I'm sure. Thank you for the question. And I want to respond to that in two parts, because I think you touched on something that's very important, which is the First Amendment issues. Anytime we're dealing with these types of advertisements, you know, we regularly advise clients with respect to, you know, try to discern where the line is, you know, what they need to report and what they don't, and what's genuine issue advocacy and when does it become candidate advocacy. And it's a very challenging thing to do. And I think it goes to, you know, the kind of inherent vagueness, I think, at issue in these types of cases. And with respect to the timing issue, I don't want to overrepresent the importance of timing. I think it is possible, I think, to have candidate advocacy, you know, more than 60 days before an election or more than 90 days before election. I mean, if in January we run an ad saying, you know, vote for candidate X in November, I mean, it'd be pretty hard for this not to be candidate advocacy. But I think it is an important factor, I think, to consider. And so I don't think the presence or absence of any one factor here is determinative. And I think that's true of the fact that these called for the special session. I mean, I think we could fairly characterize the advertisements as the primary kind of message of the communication was calling for the special session. Were it not for that piece, they would certainly be closer to the line of candidate advocacy, you know, because then all you would have is kind of a criticism of the legislator without any particular action piece tied to it. That being said, you know, we've certainly nixed ads before for other clients where they, you know, it's a piece that's very clearly a hit piece on a candidate right before the election, and they say, but call them to tell them what you think, and they're like, no, that's not really enough by itself to fix these. But here, I don't think we have that type of advertisement here, where there's just kind of an ancillary kind of phone number at the end that's, you know, ancillary to the rest of the ad. I think really the message to contact them is, I think, really the thrust of it. So I would say that the presence of that, I think, does certainly, you know, push us toward the, you know, substantially closer, I think, to the issue of, to the side of issue advocacy, and that together with the absence of other indicia of candidate advocacy, I think, are what make this issue advocacy again, because we don't reference the election or the candidate's candidacy.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have? Oh, Commissioner Kimball.
I wanted to comment on this, but do we have any other members of the public who want to address this on either side before I say anything more?
Oh, yes, thank you, Commissioner Kimball. Are there any other members of the public who wish to weigh in on this? I should have asked. I believe the person who filed the complaint was not going to be here today. And I don't know that, I don't see anybody else here, I don't believe. I'm not, yeah. Not seeing anyone else, I don't think. Hopefully I'm not missing them. Commissioner Kimball, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I don't know. I read this, both of these, both the complaint and the response over several times. And I guess my feeling is I just don't see that this is, I don't agree with the complaint. I think you've got to put this in the context of this year. It's a very unusual year with COVID shutting down the legislature. And as soon as the legislature shuts down, they talk about maybe there'll be a special session. The AEA talked about we should have a special session as early as June. It doesn't seem to me out of place that they then send out a mailer a couple months later saying, urging people to call for a special session. If this was a regular year where the legislature met until they finished their work and there was no discussion about we need a special session, then I guess I might be persuaded. But this is in the context of a discussion about a special session, and that's pretty much all that I see in the ads is, yes, let's have a special session, call them up and tell them you want a special session. So I guess I'm not really persuaded at this point. I don't know that I'm opposed to taking this the next step and doing some more investigation by Tom, but I guess at this point I would need to be persuaded more than I am now.
Well, I think if we vote that there is reason to believe that a violation occurred, I don't think it's giving Tom room for more investigation. I think there's going to be, sanctions of sort involved. Am I right about that, Tom?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kimball, I would say this: if you believe at this point that the mailer and the Facebook ads do have a reasonable meaning other than to advocate for or against a Kansas election, the MUR should terminate. There's no, I agree with Mr. Ayano that this is principally a legal issue. In an investigatory context, we would be looking at, trying to capture what within the complaint, perhaps without the complaint, and what within the complaint specifically may fit within this issue. We would be looking at what the spend was. So the burden here, as it were, is for AEA to reveal what the spending was, and that would be the facts that we don't have. And yes, Madam Chair, we have typically tried to resolve these matters by some force by some conciliation process. But I think, to Commissioner Kimball's point and to your point about procedurally, and I'm not your lawyer, although, I am a lawyer, but as you know, I'm not your lawyer. I just think it's fair for me to say, if you believe that there is a reasonable meaning other than to advocate for an election, that's the standard. And so if that standard may be applied to other communications through an investigation, but if you believe that standard hasn't been met, I think you would want to terminate this MUR.
This is Commissioner Payton. Could I jump in here?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Payton.
Yes. Well, I'm a former educator myself, and I find it and here politicians like Kate McGee refuse to fund public schools. I mean, obviously they don't say who she's running against, but they're advocating against her. And I think that this should be looked into farther.
That's how I was viewing it, from my own point of view, and consistent with our previous decisions. Commissioner Kimball, I understand what you're saying. This has been a different year. I think in my kind of thinking it over in my mind, I was considering it the way you articulated it, as far as this is a different year, everything's different this year. And at the same time, I thought, then why this timing? Why between the primary and general? Why not earlier, before school started? And so, and perhaps Mr. Ariano wants to weigh in on that, but that was part of my consideration as well. You know, it is advocating, in my mind, against a candidate, even though they have the words there of contact and asking to call a special session. It's saying Arizona can't afford to keep failing our students and educators. Arizona deserves safe classrooms. It's like they're blaming him, you know, kind of advocating against a candidate. And the timing between the general and, you know, all of it taken together, to me, and I'm sorry, Tom, if you want to jump in here.
No, I'm just waiting for whenever I just wanted to indicate I had.
Well, also this one, I'm sorry, it's hard to
That's all
talk
right.
in
Sure.
all these windows and whatever.
And
And I'm going to my phone and on this at the same time. The one that really kind of bothers me is Representative Jeff Wenninger failed to keep us safe, and a F, you know, F circled, you know, that's clearly, you know, the opposite of advocating for this. You know, it's obviously something that they're pointing at him, that he's failed to do something, and they're advocating, obviously, for them to vote against him.
Thank you. And Commissioner Meyer, did I see you had you wish to speak?
I did, and Commissioner Payton made the point just in his last comment that I was going to ask about, and this is on page 21 of our materials. And I guess I'd ask Mr. Ariano, on page 21, which is the page that says Representative Jeff Wenninger failed to keep us safe with an F on it. I mean, how is that not advocacy against the re-election of this candidate?
So I would address that. I think it goes further to the context in which the advocacy was made, and I think it goes to legislator accountability, which is certainly something that you know constituents can advocate for or against, that is, you know, divorced from, you know, the electoral aspects of that person's candidacy. You know, I think it is fair to point out the way in which a given legislator has either succeeded or failed at advancing the issues that AEA cares about, that AEA thinks that particular constituent may think about. And here we're dealing with issues of school funding and school safety. And I think the school safety issue, I think in this context, is tied to the school funding question, in the sense that I think part of the funding they wanted was for additional, you know, protections and PPE and that kind of thing, to protect student safety from COVID. And so I think pointing out to voters the way in which a particular legislator has failed to do those things, and then pairing that with the call for a special session, I think is tying for that voter the opportunity for that particular legislator to, you know, redeem themselves, so to speak, and, you know, make up for whatever legislative, you know, deficiencies they might have had up until then, by then calling for that special session. And so that's how I think that, you know, that criticism paired together with the call work in conjunction, I think, to advocate for the issue in the end. And I do, again, want to circle back to the standard, as Mr. Collins stated, which I think is actually really helpful, which, you know, you simply have to decide, I think, at this juncture, is the explanation that these advertisements were made for, you know, and specific to an issue, specifically the issue of a special session, is that meaning simply unreasonable? And only if that meaning is completely unreasonable, I think, is there cause to then advance on the complaint. I think, as you know, again, the standard again isn't whether candidate advocacy was the most likely or most reasonable explanation among several. That may well be the case to a given reader. The question is simply whether is there some reasonable meaning to this other than candidate advocacy, and that's what we're dealing with here. And I do think that standard is met.
Thank you, Mr. Arellano. Any other comments from any other commissioners?
I have one other comment. I guess this is a question for Tom and I guess Mr. Arellano as well. I mean, when I'm looking at this, I feel like the Senator Brophy McGee mailer can be interpreted as more issue advocacy, but the one as to Representative Weninger is more candidate advocacy. Can they be separated or how? How do we deal with that concern? And I don't know if any of the other commissioners feel the same way, but.
Commissioner Meyer, is that because is there no F on the Brophy McGee one?
Well, on the Brophy McGee one, to me, it just says, hey, this is how she voted. We think that's wrong. Contact her, and ask for a special session. It doesn't, I don't think it's as, I feel like it's more targeted at the issue of cutting public funding than at the senator herself. Whereas, the big grade of F is directed directly at Representative Weninger, and is more, I feel, more directed at him than at the issue of education.
Well, I think, just to chime in about that, I think cutting school funding is also kind of a negative anti-candidate thing to say, but
it's targeted at the issue is what I'm saying, not the person.
So I guess if Madam Chair, Commissioner Meyer, if the question is to me to go first, if everyone's okay with that.
Yes, please, Tom.
I think again, just want to stress that, like, look, the test is whether or not, it's no reasonable meaning. The way that we have addressed no reasonable meaning in our looking at this, guided by CJF, is that you have to actually analyze what reasonable is, and that's what the memo tries to lay out from my review. That said, if you analyze one piece of mail and say in context it has no reasonable meaning, and you analyze another piece of mail and say in context it has a reasonable meaning other than to express advocacy, then they don't need to be treated identically, and that's fine. I would note, and just to be candid, and one of the ways we try to deal with the complaint is, and if we were in a context, one of the ways we try to deal with complaints is we lumped together, and the complaint lumps together, so we just went with that framing, the internet ads that are in Appendix C of the complaint. Now, there are about 4 different formats there. 2 of the formats say politicians like so-and-so did this thing, call them and tell them to do this. I think one of them says politicians did this thing. I don't think it has a call number on it. Another one just says call what's so-and-so and tell them. And then I think there's one other. So, if you, the way the complaint's framed, there's probably, the way I addressed the complaint was to say, look, these are one effort that seems to be the shared view, and in that effort there is, I think that those are for the purpose of express advocacy. But look, what I'm trying to say is that the way the statute is written, it's a communication by communication assessment. But the most important factor in that assessment, and I'll just give an example from our own cases, and we have a case still pending at the Court of Appeals on other bases called the Legacy Foundation Action Fund. It's mentioned in the complaint. It's not something that we relied on in putting together the memo. But in that case, we really focused on analyzing why the recommendation why the proposed alternative reading was not reasonable. You know, we looked at, in that particular case, it was an ad about Scott Smith, who was running for governor. He had just announced he was running. He had, it said things about the record of an organization that he had once run that had nothing to do with his tenure there, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's how we analyze reasonableness here. My effort to and in the memo I made what I thought was the right, my assessment of the special session call itself. But again, you know, look, the question isn't whether or not, the question really is, you know, no alternative reasonable, no other reasonable meaning. And so basically another way to put that is, we are saying, at least preliminarily, if you were to vote to find reason to believe that the Education Association was unreasonable in thinking that the call to action in their mailer or online was reasonable, that they're putting that in there was not, would not reasonably change the meaning of the document into one that is not merely or exclusively for express advocacy. So, you know, I think that I would agree with everyone that this analysis is more difficult, I believe, than most people think, because of that's why we spend a lot of time on it when it comes up. But, you know, I would just, but if you don't, but again, the real question is it reasonable or not? And that's really the crux of the decision. So I guess my point is, if, as you're parsing through this, if you wanted to say, take X and Y and Z and treat them differently, I don't think there's anything that would preclude you from doing that. Although, again, I would defer to Mr. Ariano and any things he wants to raise about that. But that's a long way of saying, keeping our eye on what the lodestar is. I think there are facts there that if you might interpret different ways, I guess I don't want to go beyond that without giving Mr. Ariano a chance to talk about this.
Mr. Ariano, would you like to comment or respond?
Yes, thank you. So Commissioner Meyer, so looking to that particular Wenninger piece, I do think it's helpful. Yes, if you were to look at just the one, and this I think went to the Chairwoman Chan's points earlier. If you were to just look at the side of the mailer that says Representative Jeff Wenninger failed to keep us safe, and that was the only mailer that went out, then I think this would present a much closer question. I still don't think it would be quite a slam dunk candidate advocacy case, because you're still as far out from the election as we were. But it would make this a tougher case, I think, for us. But I think it's critical to look at that particular part of the message in conjunction with what's on the flip side, so the first piece says he failed to keep us safe. The second side of it says Arizona can't afford to keep failing our students and educators, and then contact for a special session. And so the failure, I think, is the comment about the failure to keep us safe, pairs with and is part of the message of this failure cannot continue. And there's still an opportunity to rectify that failure by calling for the special session. And so I think that's why that message is read the way it is. And legally, I think I'd venture to say that if this is a close question for the commission, I think if it's a close question whether something is candidate advocacy or not, that I think under the legal standard is dispositive, against a finding of enforcement. In other words, if it's a close question, that means that the reading that this is not candidate advocacy is not necessarily unreasonable. And if it's not unreasonable, then there is no basis, I think, for enforcement. more concretely to your question, Commissioner Meyer, as to whether the advertisements can be separated. I mean, I do think it's important on one level to look at these in the collective, I think, to understand the context in which they were made over the course of that summer. But that being said, if the commission were to find a particular mailer to be, to be actionable, but not others, I do think it's important. I do think it would be possible to separate them in that respect. And I think, I don't know if the, if AEA can break out by a particular mailer how much they spent on each one, but I do think it's, if all but one were, were not actionable, I do think it's possible to, if the commission wanted to separate them out and, find cause for some, but not others.
Thank you, Mr. Arano. All right, if there's no further comments from the commissioners, what I'm going to propose is this. I had some questions for Mr. Arano at first, but I did, based on what Tom had presented to us, I frankly was inclined to, I was inclined to believe or agree with Tom's recommendation from the start. And I am happy to go ahead with a vote if the other commissioners are comfortable going ahead, if there are no more questions. Oh, Commissioner Meyer, please.
I just want to share with the other commissioners how I see this. And that is, I respectfully to Mr. Ariano, I disagree on the Representative Weninger ad. I think that is candidate advocacy. I think the Senator Brophy McGee one is more issue. And then on the Facebook ads that are on, I think, page 2, I kind of have the same issue. And that is, I think the first, where are they? I think the first 2 where it says politicians like so-and-so, I think those fall on the same line as the Representative Weninger one, and that they are targeted at the candidate. But I think the last 2 that say, hey, call your congressman and tell them to call for a public session or special session, those are, I don't think those are candidate advocacy. So that's how I see it. So I'm going to vote to follow Tom's recommendation, but I want them to know how I see these issues when they look at the investigation.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Tom, did you have something to add?
I just, for efficiency's sake, what I would recommend the commission do, regardless of what you want, how it breaks out is, we've broken down the memo into Senator McGee, Brophy McGee, Representative Weninger, and then the categories of Facebook ads that Commissioner Meyer identified. I will tell you that based on what Mr. Arano said, I do agree that it is going to be more difficult to pursue all of those with the knowledge that some of those may not, than to simply make the determination legally now of what you believe is in and what you believe is out and narrow that playing field. Otherwise, you're telling the respondent and that we don't think these are all in the category, but we want to look at them anyway. So I would, if you want, if there's no problem with going piece by piece, given that we have a pretty clear categorization, Brophy McGee, Weninger, Facebook, and then the 2 types of Facebook ads, I would encourage, and obviously this is, and I would ask, I guess I would recommend the commission ask Mr. Arano what he thinks about this, but that I would encourage you to actually, on the record, go through those 4 types and determine which ones you want the staff to pursue because it's a legal question.
Well, I didn't necessarily agree with Commissioner Meyer.
I'm just saying that for my purposes, as a matter of procedure and having a clean record, we have some things on the record that say one thing, and then if we have a vote that says another thing, that creates a cognitive dissonance that does not work within our structure of our. So however you do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I'm just saying, if you decide to go piece by piece, from my perspective, it's better to go piece by piece.
Oh,
that's all.
Okay. Commissioner Meyer, did you want to?
Yes, I have one just procedural question on the Facebook ads on page 2 and 3. I am trying, it looks like there's 5 to me and not 4. Where's the dividing line there? Or is there another place I can see those?
There, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, if I may, I think that the distinction Mr. Collins is drawing, I think, in categorizing the Facebook ads into 2, and it's one with which I would agree, is that I think the first few are prefaced with politicians like blank refuse to fund public schools and then call for the special session. And then the last, I believe it's 3, just say contact blank and tell blank to call for a special session to fund public schools, without the prefatory remark about what they have or haven't done so far. And so to piggyback on that point, I think I'd be inclined to agree that if it might be helpful for us to determine whether the commission thinks that that any of these warrant further review for enforcement. And if the determination is that none of them do, then I think that ends the matter. But if there is a determination that at least some of them warrant further review, I do think it would be helpful to isolate which ones do and which ones don't.
This is Commissioner Payton.
Yes, Commissioner Payton.
I would just say I completely agree with Commissioner Meyer, exactly what he said, and I would advocate that we do just what he said.
All right, so Commissioner Meyer, what I think I heard, I know Tom wants to go individually, but I think what I heard was just backing out the Brophy-McGee mailer. No.
Madam Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
We have 4 categories here. We have Representative Weninger, Senator Brophy-McGee. We have the first 2 Facebook ads that say politicians like blank. And then the 4th category is the ones that say contact whomever. Okay. I suggest we do 4 separate votes on those 4 separate issues. And
Okay.
and then the commission can look at whichever ones we find reason to believe a violation may have occurred on. I think that's the easiest and quickest way to do it. And
Okay.
if anyone disagrees with that, I'll open it, but I would make a motion, we proceed in that fashion if I need to make that.
I don't even know if we need a motion to proceed in that fashion.
Well, obviously, unless no. I mean, you are free to make whatever motions you want to make. So, however you want to make them.
Do we need a motion to proceed in that fashion, though, Tom? Can I just?
Oh, no. You could just you could just ask for the motions as.
The motion. Okay, so I will do that. I will break it out by Weninger, Brophy-McGee, Facebook ads, and contact your representative. But I'm sorry, and I feel terrible because I am a little worried about the court reporter. Just after this, we will definitely take a break. I want to make sure, I was looking through my handout to make sure I knew.
Madam Chair,
Yes, I'm sorry.
if you're having to go back through and look through your documents,
Yes.
maybe right now would be a good time for the court reporter to take a break.
Thank you.
Consider.
Okay. Is that all right with Mr. Ariano as well? I apologize because I know you mentioned your time was.
That's okay. If it would help the commission to go through and review.
Okay, because I wanted to make sure I had printed everything out, and yet for some reason I'm having trouble finding.
And I should note, I don't, and I've looked up my copy as well of the complaint. I think the copies of the mailers were attached to the complaint, but the Facebook ads were just listed, I think, in a spreadsheet.
Is that the spreadsheet? Thank you.
But we have no
I can really
dispute with
read
how
that,
they've been characterized in the memo, Mr. Collins. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I spoke over you. I apologize.
Oh, no. Go ahead, please.
You go ahead. I apologize.
I was just going to say the Facebook ads themselves, I don't think were included as exhibits with the complaint, but we don't dispute with how they're characterized by Mr. Collins in the memo.
All right. Well, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. All right. Can I check in with the court reporter and see, is it all right to take a 5-minute, would 5 minutes work, or do we need 10 minutes? Is that all right? I'm going to wait and hear back from the court reporter if I can. 5 is fine. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we will come back. I will ask for the motions. I'm just going to break it all out and we'll get that done when we come back and finish up the meeting. And thank you for everybody's patience on this. Thank you so much. We will break 5 minutes. Come back at 11:30.
turn on the video. I want to turn.
Okay, we are back. Hopefully, it looks like we are on YouTube and looks like the members of the public are back and everyone can hear me. Welcome back after our break. It was a little longer than planned. Thank you for your patience. And I was able to look at all the motions, but frankly, I thought the 4 categories were one thing. And now after looking at the memo again, I'm thinking perhaps they are another thing. So I was thinking the 4 categories we were going to be making motions on were the Brophy-McGee, the Wenninger, the Facebook, and the contact your legislator. But maybe I can have Tom weigh in. And Tom, can you help clarify for me if these are the correct ones? And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And if commissioners have any thoughts too, please go ahead, Tom.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, commissioners, and I think I'm summarizing what we've said, and I also think this is consistent with what Mr. Iano has said. So obviously, Madam Chair, if there are objections or problems with this, please, obviously, we want to make sure we ask him. But I believe they are this. There's the Senator Brophy-McGee mailer. There's the Jeff Wenninger mailer. There is category 1 of Facebook ads, which is those Facebook ads that begin with the phrase politicians like so-and-so. And then there is category 2 of Facebook ads, which is those ads that simply say, call the legislator and tell them to do X. So so those are the categories as I understand them. We've come to again, and that's what, based on the conversation, I think the record, I just want to make sure that I believe that's what the record reflects. And
Madam Chairman, I agree. That's what the record reflects.
I was the only one confused, and thank you for clearing that up for me, Tom. I really appreciate it. I think then, unless anybody else has any comments, then I can move forward and ask for a motion. And I believe, does anybody have any comments or questions before I ask for a motion? And I'll tell you what the motion is that I think we're going forward with. Okay, so I think what we're going to be doing is, do we have a motion? Here's my understanding.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, Kara, go ahead.
I think it would be helpful if we got Mr. Ariano on the record saying whether or not he agrees that those are the 4 categories that have been discussed.
Thank you. Mr. Ariano, please let us know.
I do agree with Mr. Collins's categorization of the communications. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, and am I correct in my thinking that the commissioners, well, I suppose we still need a motion on the Brophy-McGee mailer, perhaps. Is there a motion on, okay, so.
I can make a motion, Chairman.
Okay.
Madam Chairman.
Okay, so yes, go ahead, Mr. Commissioner Meyer.
I move that as to the Senator Brophy-McGee mailer, that there is no reason to believe that a violation may have occurred, and that the MUR be released as to that specific mailer.
Okay, is there a second?
Tom, will that work?
Well, again, without being your lawyer, I'll say yes, but
Kara, I should say, is that clear enough?
It's a beautiful motion. I should also add, for these purposes, I'm not going to be your lawyer because of due process concerns, but I think that to cover our bases, if Mr. Ariano has an objection, he should make it now.
I have no objection to the motion as phrased.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner
I couldn't hear. Are you calling on me? If so, I vote aye.
Commissioner Payton?
I would vote aye.
Okay, I'm going to vote no on that motion, but the motion passes 3-1. And the next mailers we will vote on or take a motion on would be the Wenninger mailer. And
Madam Chairman, I can make a motion.
all right, please do.
I move that as to the Representative Wenninger mailer, that there is reason to believe that a violation of the act may have occurred and that the staff move forward with their investigation.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Payton. I would second that.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and take our vote. Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kimball,
No.
Commissioner Payton,
Aye.
and I vote aye. And the motion has passed 3-1. All right. Do I have a motion regarding the Facebook category number 1, the ads which begin with politician, I believe is how it's begin. Facebook category number 1.
Madam Chairman, I have a motion. I move that as to the category of Facebook ads that start with the words politicians like reference in the memorandum on page 2 and 3, that there is reason to believe that a violation of the act may have occurred and that staff move forward with an investigation as to those ads.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
It's Commissioner Payton. I would second that motion.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
And you voted aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimball?
No.
Commissioner Payton?
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye. The vote is 3-1. And I would entertain a final motion on Facebook category number 2.
Madam Chairman, I can make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that as to the category of Facebook ads that say, start with the words contact blank and tell blank to call for a special session, that as to those ads, there is not a reason to believe that a violation of the act occurred and that the commission staff do not move forward with an investigation as to those issues.
All right.
As to
Thank
those
you.
ads, excuse me.
Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Kimball, I second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Kimball?
Aye.
Commissioner Payton?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And we have passed that 4-0. Thank you. And with that, we are blissfully done with this item. Thank you so much, Mr. Ariano, for your time. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, commissioners and everyone. That item is complete, unless there's anyone else who wants to speak on that.
Madam Chairman, or Chairperson, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I hope you could turn your mic up. Is anyone else having that problem?
Sure. Let me get closer too and see if I can turn it up. I apologize. Maybe I need my, probably should have done my, perhaps I should have done my headphones.
It was fine before we took the break.
Huh. What happened? There we go. Is that better? Hopefully. I hope. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Apologize about that. My computer actually turned off during the break. I had to plug it back in, so maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe it reset. So thank you for letting me know. All right, let's move back to item 5, discussion and possible action on 2020 primary election candidate audits. I believe Is Mike going to take this one, I believe?
Yes, I'll take that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Hi.
Good morning. I will keep this brief. These are the final primary election audits for our candidates.
Excuse me, Mike, I can't hear you. I can hear you very faintly.
Okay, I'm sorry, Commissioner. These are the final audits for our candidates from the primary, the last 5. The audits were fine. I do want to say thank you to our auditing firm, Lester Chapman. They did a great job, especially during dealing with the COVID issue. I also want to thank our candidates and their campaigns for working so well with us. This is the first year we really had all the candidates and their campaigns getting the information to our auditors quickly, allowing us to go through it and find minor things and get those corrected. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody. It was a great team effort, and these audits turned out well. Nothing major popped up. A few minor things that were corrected, as I said, and I'd ask that the commission just approve these.
That was very fast. Thank you. Excellent. We appreciate that.
Madam Chairperson, I have a motion.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you. Please.
I move that we approve all 5 of the audits as recommended by Mr. Becker.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Kimball, I second.
Wonderful. All right, Commissioner Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Kimball?
Aye.
Commissioner Payton?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And by a vote of 4-0, we have approved the audits identified in item 5 of the agenda. Thank you, Mike. All right. That was so fast, I don't even know what's next. Oh, item 7, discussion and possible action on proposed meeting dates for February through July of 2021. All right. Commissioners, hopefully you all had a chance to review the dates that Ms. Thomas proposed. And unless there's any discussion, I'll entertain a motion in a second on the dates.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Kimball.
I move we approve the dates in the attachment of item 7.
Okay, wonderful.
Second.
Thank you. All right, let's take our vote. Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kimball,
Aye.
Commissioner Payton.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. By a vote of 4-0, we have approved the dates proposed. And so we'll be seeing you on all these dates, commissioners. And thank you for that, since I'm the only not termed out commissioner at this point. I really appreciate you all being here, truly. All right, moving on to item 8, very important business. We have recognition of Commissioner Payton for his service on the commissioner and as the chairman. So we want to thank you very much for all you did last year. And I don't know if Tom wants to say a few words.
Well, I'm obviously I think I can speak for, although I'm sure staff members would also add in, and obviously your colleagues. But I think that when we assess the last year, looking at the kinds of issues that there were, I think that Chairman Payton's leadership was very effective. I think that one of the initiatives that he did as chair was the Senate debate sponsorship, which we had never done before. I think Gina has given us not only the fact that we did it and it was important, but the fact that it was viewed and used by folks. And I think that Commissioner Payton's focus on voter education, although we were not able to do all of the things that we would have done in that year, I think we did a lot, and I credit Commissioner Payton with that personally. And obviously, although there are 2 days left on your term, I suspect we'll see you again. I hope.
With everybody else.
But I think we made serious strides this year under duress, and I think that under the duress everybody had. I'm not trying to say that our duress was more duress than other people's duress. Simply that I feel like we had able steward. So that's my view. And I don't know that I'm supposed to say anything about this at all.
Well, and I guess, I'm sorry, Tom, to put you on the hot seat. I guess what I would like to say to Commissioner Payton is, you know, one thing that I really appreciate about you is I feel like we all, you know, come at this and sometimes we all agree and we don't all agree at other times. And I think you seem to have a unique view at times that I really value, because it's when you come from a different angle that it helps me see things differently. And I think that's very, very valuable. And so I want to thank you for that. I'll never forget that rule that we put in place that kind of seemed to lead to Prop 306. I will never forget that. And I think, you know, your foresight was really, I just will never forget that. It was really important. So when you say things, I really listen. And it's not that I don't listen to other people either, but I think you have some really valuable input that you know, we all kind of operate inside of our boxes. And I think it's really valuable that we have people with different viewpoints and approaches on the commission. So thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership over the past year.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed the staff immensely, the other people, the other commissioners. And I think we all are doing this to benefit the state, benefit the voters, and remember that we're in charge of disseminating monies, and we have to be responsible, and people that come before us, we have to treat them all fairly and not do snap judgments and whatever, and just try to get a, you know, see if we can get a 4-0 vote on a lot of things. So anyway, I enjoyed my time, and I guess it's not over.
Nope.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Kimball.
I just want to echo what you and what Tom have said, and thank you for everything, Galen, and welcome to the ever-expanding club of former members whose terms have expired. We're still hanging around.
Well, thank you, sir.
What can I say?
I just want to thank Commissioner Payton as well. We don't agree on everything, but I very much respect your opinion and thank you for all your contributions to the commission. I sincerely mean that. And as an aside, today, hearing you say that I agree with everything Commissioner Meyer just said, that was one of the highlights of my times on the commission. Thank you for that. So,
I didn't know I was so hard to get along with.
no, I'm joking.
I know.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we can move on to item number 9. Is there any member of the public that would like to make comments at this time? Is there any member of the public? Oh, yep, I see Rivco is still here. I'm not sure if anybody else is here. Anybody? No comments? All right. You can also send comments to the commission by mail or email at ccec@azcleanelections.gov. So, and if there are no public comments at this time, we move on to our motion to adjourn. And at this time, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Kimball. I move we adjourn.
All right. Is there a second?
It's Commissioner Payton, I would have seconded it.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Meyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Kimball?
Aye.
Commissioner Payton?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and with a vote of 4-0, we are adjourned. See you next month. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.